In March 2013, the RCMP's National Division began its investigations into Senator Patrick Brazeau and former Senator Mac Arb's housing and living expenses. Today, I would like to share the results of these investigations with Canadians. The RCMP has proceeded to charge Mr. Brazeau and Mr. Arb with 1 count each of breach of trust and fraud under Sections 122 and 380 of the Criminal Code. Both Mr. Brazeau and Mr. Arb will be appearing in court at a later date. Canadians expect the RCMP to be exhaustive and unbiased in our investigations. From the information to obtain production orders made public by the courts. In filing these ITOs, the RCMP followed case law and determined that there were insufficient grounds to satisfy the conditions required to seal them. In some of these ITOs, the RCMP referenced that Mr. Arb had potentially committed mortgage fraud. Upon completion of our investigation, we concluded that the evidence gathered did not support these allegations. RCMP investigators continue to explore multiple leads to ascertain all the facts and collect the evidence in support of these facts. We will update Canadians when our work is completed.
Hi there, I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
This is part 1 of our look at the Conservative fails, and we started this one off with some awesome video.
Yeah, well, you know, it proves they really are criminals.
And RCMP charging them. But I want to see Wallin and Duffy.
I want to see them all doing the perp walk.
Okay, and we, of course, are urging to have Stephen Harper charged with treason while he's overseas so we can strip him of his citizenship.
Well, there are arrest warrants out for him, apparently.
For Bush too, eh?
And Blair.
Okay. So while we're promoting those types of legal types of action.
Well, don't forget, in the news recently, actually it was just this past week, they announced the federal budget for 2014.
Yes.
The timing was interesting, as it came during the Olympics when Canadians were interested in sports than in finances.
Here's your election budget.
Tom, federal budgets aren't just fiscal calculations, of course, they're political too. How much does next year's election factor into this year's budget?
Oh, huge, Donna. I mean, every economic move you make is a political decision in this town. Really what we're seeing today, this is sort of the forgettable warm-up act to the big act that's going to come on the stage in 2015 when a surplus will be announced and all sorts of election goodies will be put on the table. So it is, in many respects, a time to sort of not only lay low, but take some stuff out that you don't want on next year's budget, such as an effective cut of $3 billion to the Canadian Armed Forces. But at the same time, you leaven that out with $1.5 billion over 10 years for scientific research at universities. But as I said, I don't think we'll be talking about this budget much come next year.
And Tom, there are some vague aspects to this document, like how they deliver on a promise to crack down on unjustified cross-border price differences and what they're going to do with that big surplus that Jim Flaherty's projecting. Why not be more specific about those things?
Well, the moment you get specific, you got to start putting dollar figures to things, so you got to start spending money. So when you get specific, it starts costing you, and they don't want to do that. What they really want to do, Don, is lay out a narrative. You go through this budget, and it's unbelievable how much consulting is going to go on over the next 12 months, apparently, on everything from figuring out the price differential on goods between Canada and the United States to removing red tape for the beer industry in Canada. But all these things are going to be talked about rather than acted upon, and there's a good reason for that, because you want to be able to talk about those good things going into an election campaign, and we've just come full circle to the wonderful thing about Ottawa. It's all about elections. It's all about power.
All about politics. Tom Clark in Ottawa, thank you.
You bet.
SHD.com. It's poop Harper did.
Yeah.
And it's actually got a whole rundown on the things that they want us to forget when they're going for election.
And if you take a closer look at the budget, you'll see they're slashing public service benefits. They're cutting more services for social programs.
And it's really interesting the fact that they think we're going to stop paying attention. $60 million in propaganda so far. something like that.
Something like that.
And everyone still thinks Harper is. So we're going into.
Well, Mr. Flaherty apparently has had been in contentiousness with the rest of the cabinet. He's backing off on the income splitting scheme that they promised back during the election year, and he's got his own reasons, I'm sure. Check out the clip. You make up your own mind.
Just as the dust of yesterday's budget was settling, Jim Flaherty stirred things up. The finance minister is breaking rank and backing away from a Conservative promise to bring in income splitting.
It benefits some parts of the Canadian population a lot, and other parts of the Canadian population virtually not at all.
The promise was originally made during the 2011 election campaign. Here's how it would work. In a couple, the higher earning spouse is able to transfer income to the lower income spouse, and the result is they pay less in income tax. It was to be brought in next year once the budget was balanced. But since the announcement, analysts on both sides of the political spectrum have said income splitting will mainly benefit the rich and do nothing to help the middle class.
When we discuss it eventually in Cabinet, and caucus, I'll present my analysis to my colleagues.
Flaherty's comments were immediately followed by a rebuttal of sorts from his caucus colleagues, notably Employment Minister Jason Kenney, who Flaherty has sparred with before. Later, in question period, the Prime Minister ended up taking most of the questions directed at Flaherty.
This is the government against...
The opposition says the rift is significant.
The Prime Minister rose to answer the question, evaded it, and kept the Finance Minister seated for pretty well all of question period. I think Canadians can read a lot into that.
Flaherty's comments also have people asking whether he'll run again in the next election or whether the next budget will be his last. So far, no clear answer from the Finance Minister. All he said is, we'll see. Bashi Capellos, Global News, Ottawa.
So I guess we'll have to wait till next year to see an actual federal budget. But, you know, they're always talking about the surplus, and that's what they want to present during the election campaign next year.
And they're not talking about fractional reserve lending, fiat money systems, or the fact that our entire economy is supported by the government when all it does is make bank profits and could be managed far better by us. Yes. So when you hear about budgets, just replace the word budget with bank profits, economy, bank profits.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, I always love that one, man. But that's honesty, so stop being so honest.
But, you know, there's also another thing going on with the Harper government known as the Senate scandal. And there's been some fairly bad optics lately from the people in the Conservative caucus.
I'm shocked.
Really? I'm not. They can't seem to go a week without shooting themselves in the foot.
So let's see them line up for high caliber right now. Two clips.
At the height of the Senate spending scandal, with Canadians enraged by questionable, perhaps illegal spending, you'd think senators would have been extra cautious about spending taxpayers' dollars. But take a look at the travel expenses of the top spenders. Between mid-October and mid-November, Conservative Alberta Senator Scott Tannis billed more than $24,000 on executive-class trips between Calgary and Ottawa. The Senate rules use a point system to cap the number of flights a senator can take per year, but there's no limit on ticket costs. Executive class travel is permitted, but the Senate travel policy warns senators to use sound judgment. Manitoba Senator Donald Plett billed $12,280 traveling between Winnipeg and Ottawa over that month.
I will not comment on whether or not there will have been some mistakes made, but I will not have intentionally done anything wrong.
Then there's Don Meredith from Ontario, who travels between Toronto and Ottawa. He billed over $10,000. He didn't take the free first-class train tickets offered to senators by Via. Instead, he chose executive-class flights that cost as much as $1,400 return.
I don't think anything's out of whack there. But thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's shocking.
This public policy professor believes some senators have lost touch with what the public deems reasonable.
It's a question of judgment, and what you've shown is that some senators who are not on long-haul flights are flying first class all the time. They're bringing their spouses for trips unnecessarily. that's really a waste of money.
It's worth pointing out that the Conservative expenses were made public voluntarily. As for the Liberals, well, Liberals kicked their senators out of caucus and haven't yet delivered on the promise to make past expenses public.
Last June, the Senate decided to open its books to the Auditor General. But now, some senators are having second thoughts. For the record, Auditor General Michael Ferguson says the audits are progressing smoothly. But behind the scenes, it's a different story. Last November, senators were asked to send a form letter to the Auditor General, promising to fully cooperate with the examination of their expenses. It reads, in part, I will comply with any request for access to relevant documents. I will also provide any authorization for you to obtain access to relevant information held by third parties. But 3 months later, this senator from New Brunswick still hasn't sent the letter. Others have sent the letter but have taken out sections they don't like, putting limits on what the AG can do. Global News sent an email to all sitting senators asking if they've pledged their full cooperation with the audit. 27 said they have. 18 responded to our email telling us it's none of our business, while 48 didn't bother to respond. The Conservative leader in the Senate says he's not worried some senators have still not pledged their full cooperation.
I understand that some senators want to have more information and discuss with the Auditor General before to sign the letter, and they need to have a couple of days of reflection, I suppose.
But in fact, senators have had 3 months to reflect on this request. Now, even without the letter, the Auditor General still has the power to go ahead with these audits, but without a senator's full cooperation, auditors won't be able to get a complete picture of how senators are spending taxpayers' dollars.
We're debating on what we're going to talk about here because the Senate obviously, yes, does not care.
They don't care. They don't see a problem with overspending the public's money. It's all taxpayers' money. It's not theirs.
But then again, they do know that money is made up out of nowhere. We're just forced to pay taxes to pay off their BS.
They have a bit of trouble with transparency as well. As you can see, they're resisting the Auditor General's program. And
of course, if they're resisting the program, you know what's going on. We got a really quick clip.
Yeah, something that Vic Taves and Harper's drummer have in common.
We've got a lot more coming. What's that?
They're both slightly deviant.
Okay. We've got more coming up. Hang on.
To other news of the day, a developing story out of Ottawa. A bandmate of Prime Minister Stephen Harper has been charged with sexual assault. The man, who's been a drummer in Harper's band for years, is also a school teacher. Mike LeCouture has the details and the reaction from the Prime Minister's office. Mike?
Robin, the Prime Minister has been playing with this group of musicians for years, and they've been a fixture on Parliament Hill for just as long.
Well, you all know this one, so feel free to join in.
Here you can see the band Herringbone playing at the Conservative Caucus Christmas party. The drummer, 43-year-old Philip Nolan, is right there behind Stephen Harper. The Prime Minister's spokesperson released this statement today. We are obviously shocked and disturbed by these serious charges. No allegations of this nature have ever been brought to our attention. Anyone found guilty of these charges should face the full force of the law. The Tories on the Hill were equally shocked at the news.
Totally. And it's completely unacceptable. And the full force of the law should be applied.
According to police, the alleged incidents happened between 1998 and 2000. The victims were 2 female students in grade 7 and 8. Nolan is a music teacher at Avalon Public School here in Ottawa, and he turned himself in this morning.
It's an ongoing investigation. All I can tell you is what the charges were, and it was 5 counts each of sexual assault, sexual exploitation, and sexual interference.
And the school board tells us Nolan has been suspended without pay while facing these charges. Robin?
Mike LeCouture in Ottawa.